Hi, Wandsworth Libraries. I'm Cynthia Miller, and I'm reading a few poems from my new collection, Honorifics. Um, the first poem I'll read is called Malaysiana, and it's set in Kuching, in the town that I was born in Borneo. This is Malaysiana. Early morning blessing of hawkers slinging noodles, every face a sun through clouds of starchy steam. Reservoir Park at dawn, clouds behind Fort Margarita, a small sugared cake on the riverbank. Golden State Building peaked like a 1950s cone bra. Everyday things, motorbikes guttering, out of season things, spiky knuckle duster of durian, the suddenness of sunrise on the equator. You turn away for a second and bam, it's filling the whole room. Love, there's no such thing as empty space in 100% humidity. Daytime radio, Canto popsicle melting from an open car window. Yellow spine Nancy Drew books handed down. Wet kitchens, wet market with their own gravity. Exoplanet of ice and fish and tumble of fruit. Hibiscus tea. Cats insistent at the back gate. Geometric delight of layer quay. Papayas. Dipper baths. Twice daily. 5-foot way between a shop and the street where someone is cutting their neighbor's hair. A whole street of old-fashioned goldsmiths. War hangover, talking about eating when we're not finished with this meal. Boiled peanuts, Chinese opera, friends' houses where we don't call ahead, but they know we're coming anyway. Slow river sachet. Wet laundry like diligent flowers, following the morning sun. Marble-topped kopitiam tables. Streets where you recognize everyone and call out to each other. How's your mother? I saw your cousin the other day playing badminton. When are we going for Louis Cha? Streets you can navigate with your eyes closed. Kumquat tree we watered for months not knowing it was plastic. Sally, the adopted street mutt, and her benevolent gaze. You're a tiny saint, Sally. You're going straight to dog heaven. Chinese moms don't say, I love you. They cut fruit for dessert, press gold earrings into your palm, buy 30 kilos of ginger, and cook all your postpartum confinement meals for a month. No questions asked. Hand washing our clothes every morning makes us glad to be in our skin. Speaking of food, this next poem is Feast Day. It was written during lockdown and really encapsulates all of the longing for socialization, but also cooking for others and hosting dinner parties. Feast Day. One of these days, I'll make every single recipe from the beautiful cookbooks you've gifted me all these years and which I keep with good intentions. I'll invite everyone round. They'll sit on the floor, lean against sofa legs, balancing plates on their laps and asking for seconds. It'll be an all-day open house. Us in the kitchen, hip-checking drawers closed, topping up drinks, singing out to the crowd in the living room, me sending you to the corner shop for a single lemon. I announce the arrival of the next course like guests at a fancy ball. Mountains of buttery pilaf, gunpowder potatoes, nali nahari lamb falling off the bone, serrated sugar crust of caramelized peaches, and for dessert, the crowning glory, cherry pie still bubbling from the oven and its magnificent golden coat of pastry. Years later, we'll still remember it, how the house had never been so full. This next poem is a slightly unusual take on a sonnet. This is Sonnet with Lighthouses. The first lighthouse is you. The second lighthouse is you, age 12, turned around beneath a wave. The third lighthouse is a hyperbaric chamber you clamber into when you dive too deep and rise too fast. An oil dark depth that's child's play for trained divers, but you clawed yourself up. The fourth lighthouse tunes into the shipping song over sea static. Rain later, good, occasionally poor. The fifth lighthouse says over and over, I love you, I love you, I love you, you there. Every wall in the sixth lighthouse is load bearing. The seventh lighthouse is a scattergram of light that indicates the strength and direction between two variables, ship and safe harbor, moon and tide. Shore and vagaries of current, each of us to each other, our future selves to our past selves, every dear friend placed at strategic vantage points in our life. Just seeing the eighth lighthouse strengthens your circuitry, blood zinging around your bones in delight. The ninth lighthouse has worse things happen at sea, cheerfully cross-stitched on a pillow it bought drunk off Etsy. The 10th lighthouse sometimes just wants to be a lifeboat or a ladder or an oxygen mast. Drop down in case of emergencies and not always looking out for other people when they can't help themselves. The 11th lighthouse's favorite piece of furniture is the walnut drop leaf table that opens so everyone can fit around it. The 12th lighthouse makes you feel like stepping out of time. The 13th lighthouse comforts you with the mathematical proof which shows that light knows where it's going, that it takes the shortest possible route, even through water and gale forces. The 14th lighthouse hollers, Marco, Polo, everyone you love shouts back. There's a lot of water imagery, sea imagery, swimming imagery throughout this collection. So for the penultimate poem, this is How to Perfect a Flip Turn. The first thing to remember about flip turns is that they're made blind. Don't look ahead to the wall or to your legs. Trust that for once your body will not fight itself. Trust that grace comes easy as breathing. It's a delicious thrill, darting through the water and your whole self jonesing with chlorine want, and for once your limbs perfectly long and lean, and your body caught in its own headlong momentum. The moment before the turn is like opening a window to unexpected birdsong, despite rain and the late hour. It is never wanting for anything, except the easy slip of your body in its spandex skin. You kick off wherever your feet land. The final poem I'll read is the last poem in the book. It's called Voicemails from My Mother, and it's a stitched together poem that comprises of actual voicemails, voice notes, conversations I've had with my mother over the years. So all the stories in it are true. An old story, one you know. Once a snake ate my cat, so my second brother killed it dead and made snakeball soup for the whole family. Maybe next time our table will be bigger. Next time, a snake big enough to feed the street. Remember, I taught you which palms to drink from, how to pinch thin moons of dough around the filling. I am running out of time to tell you everything. I can't, for the life of me, remember what I called to say. Don't be stupid. No one died of homesickness. What a waste a one-way ticket would be. Sayang, I'm sorry if I woke you up. Sayang, everything here tastes different. Fish fried in black oil and Maggie magic syrup. Missy brought her youngest daughter to lunch today. You know Isabel, the one at Yale. She reminded me of you, or perhaps you are still that way. I thought I'd spend a year here, but fruit trees take a year to yield anything. I'm going out to the field today. The light is doing something new, and it's time for planting. Sayang, everything that's dead is just fertilizer. All I need I can carry in my hands. I liked me best when I chose to leave. What I took with me, who I left, there at the border, squinting a little, raising a hand. I've also been asked to read a poem of my choice in keeping with this year's theme, a poem that means a lot to me. And this is a poem called "How to Triumph Like a Girl," and it's from this amazing collection called "Bright Dead Things" by Ada Limon. And it's just a great poem. It's actually the first poem that opens the collection. How to Triumph Like a Girl. I like the lady horses best. How they make it all look easy. Like running 40 miles per hour is as fun as taking a nap or grass. I like their lady horse swagger after winning. Ears up, girls, ears up. But mainly, let's be honest, I like that they're ladies. As if this big, dangerous animal is also a part of me, that somewhere inside the delicate skin of my body there pumps an 8-pound female horse heart, giant with power, heavy with blood. Don't you want to believe it? Don't you want to lift my shirt and see the huge beating genius machine that thinks, no, it knows, it's going to come in first? Thank you so much.
Hi everyone, my name is Troy Capita. I'm a senior library assistant for Northcote Library here at Wandsworth Libraries, and we just had the wonderful Cynthia Miller read us some work. Say hi, everyone.
Ah.
I just said hi to the audience and stuff, but let me just give you a wonderful bio introduction to Cynthia. Cynthia Miller is a Malaysian American poet, poetry festival producer, and innovation consultant living in Edinburgh. Honorifics, the book she just read from, is her debut collection. She co-founded Verve, Birmingham's Festival of Poetry and Spoken Word, and sits on the advisory board of its sister press. How are you doing today?
Yeah, really well, thanks. Thanks so much for inviting me to be part of this interview series. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Thank you. We're always striving to have the sort of up and coming poets today. And when news came about your debut collection releasing, I was like, I have to have Cynthia here over. So how's that going, by the way? Because you just released your debut collection this year. Yeah, tell us about that.
It feels really unreal.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm a poet. I should be more articulate about that. No, it feels incredible. I mean, it launched 2 weeks ago now, and it always feels really strange launching something that you've worked on, so intimately, so intensely, and for me particularly during lockdown, and then also releasing it into the void of lockdown. It just feels all very odd, but yeah, slightly surreal, amazing, really all of the emotions at once.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, and I know you launched a book yourself as well during lockdown, and
I did, yeah.
It's so strange. Like it feels like it reaches so many more people because obviously events are more accessible and digital and things like that. But also, at the end of the day, you're like, oh God, this book, it's now like out in the world. So yeah, an odd feeling, definitely.
Yeah, it's an interesting feeling because like a lot of the poets who have spoken to about this, the fact that they've released work during the lockdown, is like, we've had, and I'm assuming you're going to be doing a lot of this as well. We've promoted these books like within the confines of our house. So like all these people know about it, but it's like you don't physically, like you can't sink in that it's out there.
Yeah.
So yeah.
100%. I think it was when because a bunch of my colleagues and obviously like friends around the world and stuff have ordered the book, and it was when I was starting to get like their text messages to me of them holding the book, and I was like, oh my God, it was so weird. My first thought was actually like, oh, I can't take it back now. Like, it's real.
Yeah.
It's actually in people's hands, and there was something really just really incredible about that moment. Feels like a long time coming, but
yeah. It's like, God forbid I see like an editing typo in the manuscript now.
I
It's like,
did.
oh, did you? Oh
Yeah, I
no.
did. And I was like, I know I'm gonna find one and it's gonna drive me crazy. But like it's fine. It's
Yeah.
fine. It's one of those like it was printed, it's done, it's okay.
It's gonna be perfectly fine.
It's
And
gonna
we
be
already
perfect.
know it's perfectly fine because it has been nominated. It has won awards already. One
Yeah.
of which was the this year's Eric Gregory Award, which was revealed about a month ago, quite a while ago, hasn't it? Before the book was released. How was
Mhm.
that? What was that like?
Yeah, again, surreal, incredible, thrilling. I think the Eric Gregory's, I've been applying to the Eric Gregory's probably for like the last 5 or 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
So persist, keep applying. And yeah, really, really humbling and really grateful to
Mm-hmm.
receive Eric Gregory. A lot of the poetry heroes that I really look up to, are on that really esteemed list. One of my poetry tutors from Warwick has an Eric Gregory, and I remember when I first started like really exploring poetry in the UK, and attending readings and signing up to writing workshops and stuff like that. I think the first ever festival I attended was to go see Sarah Howe read. And I think this is in 2014, 2015. And I remember being there. It was like in the middle of some village somewhere in Oxfordshire. I'd taken like 2 trains, a bus, a local taxi to be like in the front row in the audience, like looking up at her, like, oh my God, I want to be you. I would never say that to her. But yeah, that thing of, it's a hugely inspirational list to be part of, and feels really, yeah, incredible to have the work recognized, and even before publication. That was really lovely. So yeah, really, really humbling, really unreal. Just
Yeah,
saying that.
it's such a heartwarming feeling, isn't it? Because I think I think a lot of what you said reminds me a lot of the power of community
Mm.
and the
Mhm.
teamwork and a lot of family. And people outside of people always telling me like, oh, being a poet must be so solitary. Because not really, because by the time like a project finishes, you realize it has gone through so many people and so
Mm.
many edits, so many like revisions, so many opinions. And I think one important factor to all of this is encouragement and that sense of gelling and bonding. And it's never solitary, you know.
No, no, never. I mean, maybe
Exactly.
the writing sometimes feels solitary, but like I think, you look at the acknowledgements page of any collection, and it's just a whole list of all the mentors that have directly or indirectly shaped that poet's work, kind of the unseen hand, the editors, the friends, the community. And it's exactly as you say, the community is such an important part of being a poet and writing in a contemporary way. I think that becomes, yeah, it was a hugely important part of definitely like my writing process for the last few years, but particularly during the last year and a half. I think, yeah, when we have been more isolated in our homes, knowing that there is that community of writers that you can rely on. I mean, so many of the poems in the book were, the book would not have happened without the poetry community, and I guess I'm putting like a capital C on that, because it's so many friends who helped to edit it, and so many people who have advised me in certain ways, poetry mentors who've kind of helped me to realize what this project could be. And those moments, because every writer has it, where you read your own work and you're like, why would anyone publish this? This is
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's okay. It's fine. Don't worry. I think it's been really important. And actually, as part of the launch, a lot of people have kind of come up to me and said, after the launch party for honorifics, that sense of love and care and community came through so strongly, with the guest readers. Obviously, Romulan couldn't be there, but with the 3 guest poets, Akka and Jenna and Romulan, those bonds, that friendship, that sense of mutual support and mentorship has been a real kind of pillar of my poetry experience the last couple of years.
Yeah.
It's really hard to separate the book from the experience of writing and the experience of yeah, having those poetry friendships.
Yeah. It was a beautiful evening. I was one of the audience members for that show, and one thing that I took away from that was like, wow, even though it was an online event, but like you could feel the presence and the connection, and like everyone had a purpose of being there, and that was all in celebration of you and your work and your wonderful words. And I think in any online event and any online poetry event that feels that, there's just something beautiful about it that you can never really explain. but you feel like, but afterward you feel so grateful. It's like, oh my God, we did it on Zoom, but it feels like it came from an actual night. It's so much fun.
That's so good. I'm so glad. I'm like, that's kind of
Yeah.
the feeling that I wanted that event to have, like
Hmm.
imparting that sense of love and joy and warmth.
Yes.
That's, that's what it should feel like. But yeah, it feels really weird now, the book being out. Like obviously there's quite a lot of the poems are very, very vulnerable, they're very personal. There's a whole like, it's not me, it's the speaker of the poem, but like, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and I think there's something really interesting about that feeling, like what happens after you launch your first book.
Mm.
And navigating those waters. If you have any tips, let me know. Because I feel like there's so much pressure, specifically in the UK, and we can talk about like prize culture later. But there's a lot of pressure on a debut
Right.
book,
Hmm.
and weirdly, I was reflecting on some of the questions that you had, and one of the things I was sort of reflecting on after the event and after the post-event high, obviously you feel vulnerable because it's like, here's this thing that I've created, it's out in the world, but in a way also kind of freeing, I think, because of that pressure on the first book. In my mind I was like, okay, that project is done now, I can close that chapter. I'm really proud of the book, I'm glad I had that experience, but really also curious to see what comes next. I have very long fallow periods where I don't write at all, like years don't write at
Hmm.
all. So maybe the next thing's going to just be really weird and really experimental and really bizarre and something totally different. Um, but yeah, it feels like almost that, like the closing of that chapter, and let's see what happens next.
Yeah. I think from if I could, I think a lot of what you said is quite relatable to my own experience because like, when my old book came out like last year, I was like, well, that's it. My career is over. I peaked at 24. I don't have anything else to live for. And there was a long period of time where I was like, I'm just not producing anything. I don't want to touch anything. And then
Mhm.
the feeling comes back. And
Mm.
then you're so the sort of like feeling of like desiring to use this platform to create something, it
Mm.
eventually comes back. So there's something reassuring about it. And I think there's something about that gap in between creating that we
Mm.
need to like actually stop putting so much pressure on.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's so true. I think I read somewhere it was like another artist or creator or something who described their creative practice as like inhale years and exhale years. So exhale
Mm,
years are when you're creating, you're producing, you're turning thoughts, experiences into things, artifacts, books, music, whatever. And inhale years are when you're absorbing and you're mulling over and you're thinking, or you're walking or whatever. But you
mm,
need that almost like creative input to fill the hopper again before you exhale out. Because if
yeah.
you're just producing, you're not, yeah, there's not enough material to work with,
Yeah.
which I found quite reassuring.
Yes. Yes. Because I think that in that inhale exhale imagery, it gives you a direction to go from, isn't it?
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
yeah, I can't wait to see what else you write next because
me
you
too,
know
because I have no idea what it's going to be.
yeah. Well, so far you've written a lot of wonderful poems out of like the themes that you have touched upon, and one of them, I know, as someone who has come from a different country, immigrated,
Mm.
immigration is a theme that you have played with so beautifully, both from a literal sense and metaphorical sense. You speak about outer space, immigration in terms of different countries and different relationships. um After, I guess, after the high of the shows, and you're going to be coming into promoting the book and talking about the book even more, how do you think your own personal relationship with immigration as a wide term has
Mm.
developed so far because of poetry and honorifics?
Mm. That's a really good question. I feel like I could be answering that question for days. Yeah, I'll try and do your beautiful question justice. I think so. How is my relationship with migration changed as a result of writing and poetry? I think that the process of writing honorifics has, yeah, I don't know, deepened isn't quite the right word, but brought migration themes of family, immigration, space time, like very much to the center of my field of vision. Feels like it really sharpened my experience of it. made it much, it was like someone turned up the intensity, like the dial on the intensity. Um, when I think about those things. Yeah. So it felt like in a way, because a lot of the poems were written during the first lockdown. So in that like spring, summer period of last year, I was living by myself in a flat, hadn't seen my family for a really long time. And it felt like all the poems that I was writing were these weird little longing poems and poems about distance and belonging and feeling very, very separated. So even though I was writing about outer space and exoplanets and families, it really felt like everything was revolving around that central theme of migration and distance and belonging. Um, and I remember reading this unbelievable, by Vanessa, I think it's Vanessa Angelica Villarreal. She wrote this poem called, I wrote down the title of it. So it looks like the title of the poem looks like an equation. It's like F, so function equals root, parentheses, times future. I'm not very good at math. I'm sure there's a more articulate way of expressing that. But like it won a major prize from Poetry Magazine just for how visually innovative it was. And in that poem, she explores migration through family history, lineage, like as a function over time. Can't even do it justice. It's an amazing poem. But it felt like as I was reading that poem and really thinking about migration, that sense of the arrow of time or family lineage as like a continuing line into the future, a line without an endpoint, it felt like all of the poems that I felt like I really needed to write and had to write with some urgency came out of that wellspring. So the poems about family, say in glitch honorifics, and like slightly disrupting or troubling the family tree come from the same emotional space as a poem like Proxima B, which is about two people, one on Mars, one on Earth. Yeah, all of those poems around longing and migration were all very, very intense. And I think the journey that I went on with those is I almost turned to academia and like very, very theoretical things. So my bookshelf behind me somewhere are books by Carlo Rovelli, and I mentioned him in the book. He's this incredible Italian physicist who talks about space and time and quantum physics, like stuff that is way over my head, but he writes so beautifully, so poetically. And I feel like I journeyed into like the theoretical, the conceptual, really trying to understand migration as a displacement, a dislocation through space and time. And then that kind of exploration brought me back to the personal lived experience of people, of families being dislocated across time zones, across generations. I mean, Ramalin Ante writes so beautifully about this kind of throughout her book. And it felt like a lot of the book is really trying to make sense of both those things, like the physics of migration and space and time on like a celestial scale, and then the very, very human scale where we're in lockdown, I am separated and I miss you and you and you and you and you and you, which I think is a really rambly way of saying I don't know if migration has necessarily changed as a result of this poetry or this book, but it feels like it's come to really, really sharp relief. Yeah. Does that answer your question? I don't know if
I
it
think
did.
wonderfully. I could hear you. Let's talk about this all day, honestly, because as an audience member, as a reader of your work, you have given me such a permission to like explore what immigration actually means or could mean,
Mhm.
because I've only really come to understand immigration in the sense of a person moving from one country to another, and the social and economic sort of circumstances that come between that. So
Mhm.
when you decide to include things such as physics and a bit of Eurydice's story from the Greek myths, and I was like, oh my God, that's right. Like there's so much juice you can squeeze from that. And I think you did it so beautifully, and you just explained it so beautifully as well. And
Thanks.
yeah, I think it's something that's very important and relevant. It's something that people can really relish from.
I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Yeah, it feels like a really rich area. And then, I mean, and then you have a poem like The Home Office, which looks at that in,
Mhm.
a very satirical, I guess, way. But yeah, migration in the context of our current political climate, which is, yeah,
Yeah.
obviously really.
Like I remember there was like an excerpt from your poem Yellow
Mm,
about the person in the clerk sort of making an error
mhm,
about someone's last name, which has like a reverberation in the generations to come. It's like I
mm,
never come to think about that because that this is something that affects like a lot of people, and it's just
mm.
not something that is talked about. And the fact that you bring light to that is wonderful. I think it's something that should be lauded.
Thanks. I appreciate
Yeah.
that. And that particular story is really interesting. It was a comment that my mom made very, very offhandedly. And she was talking, yeah, she was talking about Chinese, she was talking about family names, she was talking about how names kind of shift over generations. And it was a couple of years ago. I was asking her a bunch of questions because I feel so almost alienated from that culture. I was born in Malaysia. We went back for summers and stuff, but there's always this sense of, yeah, not quite fitting in whenever I go back. So whenever I ask about our family history, culture, identity, I always feel slightly like an alien looking in. And so I feel like I have to ask all those questions, things that may be totally apparent to her and to people who live there. Maybe, I don't know. But it felt like I had to uncover it. So yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. I had just watched this movie called Happy Together. It's a
Mm,
film about two Cantonese men who were in a relationship and moved to Argentina to have a better life. And the discussion of immigration in the sphere of race and sexuality and queerness, it was such a beautiful, chaotic, and like intense story. And that's something that just reminded me from the stories you've been telling me now, because like these are things that happen and have happened and have had like all these effects on people. And it
mm,
just sometimes things like poetry reminds us of the importance of recording these instances,
mhm.
because I'm because I don't know who said this, but if you have an understanding of your history, you have a better chance of, I don't know, sorry, I'm totally butchering this quote, but
Understanding yourself. It's like you kind of have to know where you came from in order to
kind
understand.
of, and then understanding how you move forward,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
if you have a history, there's a structure, and then you have to
Mm,
understand how to come forward. I
mhm.
really butchered that, but yeah, basically.
I totally get it. No, I
Yeah,
understand. Don't worry.
yeah, but yeah, that's one of my biggest takeaways from your collection, and I
Mm,
can't wait to keep celebrating it further.
thanks, Troy.
Cool.
Thanks.
So for my last question,
Yeah,
I just want to end on a bit of a, oh, actually I have two more questions. You
you do.
have done, yes, I have, you have done great work as a co-founder for the Verve Poetry Festival. How was your work as a member of the creation of that
So, like my
event?
experience of Verve.
Yes, how has that affected your own writing, and how has that made you the poet that you are today?
Gosh. Also excellent questions. Let me answer that in parts. So the
Mhm.
effect on me as a poet today, and then the effect on my writing. They're very much linked. Verve. I mean, Verve is one of the things I'm like most proud of. Obviously, I'm very proud of the book, but Verve is just like on another level. I think it felt like such a privilege, really, to be able to, yeah, work with Stuart Bartholomew, work with the team, um, work with all the poets to bring this thing to life. And I'll never ever forget, I think it was Verve 3. We were in the old rep in Birmingham, and I was standing in the wings, like just because it was a proper theater then, standing in the wings. And I was watching the audience, and I was watching the tech guys in the booth, and I could hear like the technical guys behind me and the volunteers like running up and down the stairs making stuff happen. And I was watching Sunita Chakraborty read, and she was the festival poet. And it was just this totally remarkable feeling of like watching this thing come together and go, this is incredible and this is so much bigger than all of us. It felt like a real kind of homage to community. Um, and also, in particular, that was the only bit of programming I'd ever done for Verve. A couple years ago, or a couple months prior, like, Stu, I really like this poet. Can we fly her here from the States? Like, but we made it happen. Um, how did it shape me as a poet? I think one of the things about Verve is whether you're on stage or whether you're in the audience or even just as a volunteer, kind of watching this orchestration of events come together. You use the word community previously, and that absolutely comes through. So, like the sense of warmth and focus and attention and care that really permeates the experience of Verve. I think more than anything, it's really highlighted the importance of that community. Not just writing for your community, but how to be a good member of community um, as a poet. I feel like I'm not being very articulate. It feels like a feeling that I can't really put words to, but that thing becomes incredible. And I think also just, I mean, Stu is the programming genius behind Verve. So he chooses who goes in the program. He kind of handles that side of things. And it's just been incredible. It's been incredible being able to like sneak into the back of workshops and master classes and spy in on all the readings. Just the range of poetry that we've had at Verve and I've been able to listen to and witness has been totally breathtaking. Like poets who I think, having watched them perform, have actually made me go, oh, okay, I can push the boat out. I can be a little bit more experimental. I didn't even realize that you could do this with poetry. I remember in year one, we had Hannah Silva and I think it's Tomomi Adachi doing this unbelievable that they were like hooked up to this poetry machine that they'd created where like on their clothes and sensors on their hands, where every time they like moved, a digital sound would be, I can't even describe it, but it was like very experimental, immersive digital poetry sound machine making. And I remember at the time being like, what is happening? This is so cool. I don't understand what's going on. This is poetry, like amazing. Just this like multi-course feast of poetry, for 4 days every single year has been really, really remarkable. It's helped me kind of open my eyes to what's possible.
Oh yeah. And again, we always go back to community because that's where it all comes back to, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
That just reminds me of, from my side of the poetry scene, a lot of experimentation with music, dance and hip hop and beats and music and imagery and videos. I had the same reaction as you did. I was like, I have no idea what they're doing, but it sounds amazing and I want to be a part of it. Just, this opening up of and shifting of your definitions of things. There's power to that also because again, the word used was care. When a community of people do things for one another that enacts care, there's something beautiful about it. Yeah. So again, for my last question, okay. Which is one of the fun ones I decided to ask people. If you could speak to your past self from 5 years ago, what sort of advice would you give them with all that you know now?
These are really good questions. These are really hard questions as well.
Okay.
What advice would I give to myself? So I've traveled back in time 5 years. I'm standing in front of, I won't tell you my age, Cynthia of then, giving her advice. Probably number one is like, don't rush. Yeah, don't rush the collection. I feel like there was enormous pressure that I put on myself, to be like, right, I need to do this by then. Yeah, just take a bit of a breath. The poems will come, and that's okay. I think probably the next, I guess, related piece of advice is one from John McCulloch. I think he's a pen in the margins poet, brilliant, very prolific, and I think he mentioned this on Twitter once. One of his best pieces of writing and reading advice for poets of all ages is to create your own personal anthology. So when you come across poems that you love, screenshot them, type them up, save them, put them in your little file, digital or physical, whatever. But that anthology that you curate of poems that you love, poems that speak to you, poems that you hate but you admire something about them, poems that have interesting style and variety and technique and form. capture that, save that, because that becomes your reference guide for, yeah, when you need to create the next thing, or if you need writing prompts or inspiration, that's where you delve into. He actually posted this morning, I think it was on Twitter, read like a hunter, which is just lovely. I love that sense of like focus, precision, not just reading as if you're snacking, but really being very thoughtful about how you read, reading like a poet. And I think that's lovely. I tried to implement that with like Evernote. So I have a whole kind of collection of poems, writing inspiration, little, cutting room floor bits, because you never really know what's going to end up in the poem and what's going to end up in the next poem. So a lot of the poems in honorifics, I've been trying to write for years, and like I'll go back to my Evernote files from like 2014, 2015. I'm like, oh, I can literally track the genesis of that poem through a couple of lines that have morphed here and there. I've salvaged it from one poem and popped into the next. So that living, breathing anthologizing of things that you find interesting is going to be so generative as a process. Yeah, I wish I'd done that way earlier.
I think that was fantastic. I think the anthologizing of poems, that's such a great idea. I never thought about that. That's something I think I'm gonna do that now.
Yeah, you should. I mean, like, I feel like I've got in my memory.
Yeah.
Like, I really love that poem where I'll dog ear, underline things in books, but really having a separate thing of like, oh, I can go back to that. I mean, it takes effort, obviously, but it'd be really helpful.
And I think what you said about a poem taking years to be written, and parts of it coming from different poems through the years, I think there's something really reassuring, like as a poet myself, it's like, oh my god, so I can do that. There's something like great about it as well. Like as you said, it becomes a living, breathing organism. That I think is, man, like, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I like, if an editor or whoever, yourself, if you're like, this poem isn't working, it's not just like, well, see you never. Back to the drawer, it's never going to see the light of day. Like, there's always something interesting that you can kind of recut. It feels like, I don't know, that feels like a lot of my process for honorifics was like a bit of a puzzle, trying to piece together the interesting pieces and how does this fit in a way that's interesting to me and pleasurable to write, but also obviously, a good poem in the end. Yeah, that wouldn't have happened if I didn't have all the scraps and the cutting room floor pieces like ready and waiting to go.
That's amazing. Cynthia, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us here at Wandsworth Libraries. You have been fantastic. Everyone watching right now, please grab a copy of Cynthia Miller's debut collection, Honorifics, available right now at Nine Arches Press. They're available also in different bookstores, aren't they?
Waterstones, and I'm sure your local independent bookstore can order it in for you if you'd like. But also, if you want a signed copy, you can contact me through my website or Twitter. So yeah. Oh wait, this is my reading copy. You can tell.
I love that.
But Troy, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this series. It's lovely to chat to you, and thank you for your thoughtful questions.
Fantastic. I'll speak to you very soon. Have a good day.
See you later.